to this edition of News Today, a series in which we discuss and briefly analyze the important news of the day. Let's have a look at today's main headlines. The Supreme Court has issued guidelines to high courts to monitor the early disposal of cases against MPs and MLAs. WHO unveils a framework for climate resilient and low carbon health systems. Solar module manufacturing capacity in India reached 60 gigawatts. A study by Nature Ecology and Evolution Journal points out that invasive species can benefit from extreme weather. Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Rural Livelihood Mission and Small Industries Development Bank of India signed an MOU to help self-help groups. Judgments were delivered by the Court of Chief Commissioner of Persons with Disabilities to promote accessibility and rights of differently abled individuals. Starting with today's first news, the Supreme Court has issued guidelines to high courts to monitor the early disposal of cases against MPs and MLAs. Guidelines were issued by the Supreme Court while hearing a case challenging Section 8.3 of the Representation of People Act 1951. Section 8.3 of the Representation of People Act of 1951 imposes a 6-year ban from contesting election by persons convicted of offences with a minimum 2-year sentence. Now let's take a closer look at the issued guidelines. Suo motu cases titled in re designated courts for MPs and MLAs will be registered by the Chief Justices of High Courts to monitor such cases. Such cases can be heard by a special bench led by Chief Justice. Further, the designated court should give priority to specific cases like criminal cases against MPs or MLAs punishable with death or life imprisonment, cases punishable with imprisonment for 5 years or more, and other cases. The trial court in these cases shall not adjourn the cases except for rare and compelling reasons. High courts were also directed to evolve measures for effective monitoring of such cases by invoking its power under the Article 227. Under the Article 227(1), high courts shall have superintendence over all courts and tribunals throughout the territories in relation to which it exercises jurisdiction. Before moving on, let's take a look at some other relevant Supreme Court judgments. In 2018, the Supreme Court made it mandatory for political parties to publish the details of criminal cases pending against their candidates, including on their websites. In Lily Thomas versus Union of India case of 2013, the court had directed that legislators who have been awarded a minimum of 2 years of imprisonment would cease to be members of the House. In the Union of India versus Association for Democratic Reforms case of 2002, the Supreme Court stated that electors had the fundamental right to know antecedents of candidates contesting elections.
Now the next news. The World Health Organization has unveiled a framework for climate resilient and low carbon health systems. The framework aims to enhance the resilience of health systems while simultaneously reducing greenhouse gas emissions to help safeguard the health of communities worldwide. Its key objectives include guiding health sector professionals through collaboration, developing comprehensive and practical strategies like national climate change and health strategy plans like the health component of the National Adaptation Plan. Defining roles and responsibilities for health decision makers is also one of the objectives. The framework proposes interventions around 10 components categorized under 6 building blocks of health systems. Number 1, healthcare workforce. Number 2, health information systems. Number 3, essential medical products and technologies. Number 4, service delivery. Number 5, financing. And lastly, leadership and governance. The framework is important to implement the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health or ATSCH goals. ATSCH is a WHO initiative established in 2022. It is an informal voluntary network which works to realize the ambition set at COP26 to build climate resilient and sustainable health systems. A sustainable health system is the need of the hour, as it will help the health sector reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, reduce environmentally harmful healthcare waste, and also reduce the cost to increase accessibility and affordability. In the next news, India has achieved a solar module manufacturing capacity of 60 gigawatts. Solar modules are made by connecting photovoltaic or PV cells or solar cells. They're manufactured from semiconductor materials like crystalline silicon. The modules convert the light energy captured from the sun into electrical energy. The achievement is significant as India aims to build 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030, of which solar energy contribution will be around 300 gigawatts. Now let's take an overview of the status of solar energy in India. Well, India has over 100 solar module manufacturers with 27 selected manufacturers having a capacity of 50 gigawatts. India exported nearly 3,900 megawatts of solar modules with the potential to increase to 30 gigawatts annually. High quality Indian solar modules are in demand globally, particularly in North America and Europe. Coming to the challenges that the solar energy sector is faced with, lack of manufacturing capacity for the initial stages of the photovoltaic value chain like polysilicon and wafer is a challenge. The other challenges being the high capital and operating cost as solar cell production line is highly capital intensive. There is also a lack of research and development in terms of infrastructure, quality testing facility and skilled human resources. The other challenges being the export limitations and technology adoption lag. However, the government has taken several initiatives in that regard, like the PLI scheme for solar PV module manufacturing, which is expected to add 48 gigawatts of new manufacturing capacity over the next 3 years, 40% basic custom duty to encourage domestic manufacturing, approved list of models and manufacturers by Ministry of New and Renewable Energy that enlists eligible models and manufacturers complying with BIS standards. And lastly, the preference in public procurement.
Moving on, according to a study by Nature Ecology and Evolution Journal, invasive species can benefit from extreme weather. First of all, let's discuss what are invasive species. An invasive species refers to a species that is alien to a specific ecosystem, and its introduction can potentially lead to economic or environmental harm or pose a threat to human health. Only those alien species that establish and spread with negative impacts on biodiversity, local ecosystem and species are called invasive alien species. Coming back to the news, let's take a look at some of the key findings of the study. The study points out that invasive species which are often introduced by humans possess traits such as adaptability and high reproductive rates which enable them to survive in disturbed ecosystems. They are also often very good at dispersing their seeds, allowing them to quickly colonize disturbed areas. Extreme weather can eliminate native species, freeing up resources like water and space, hence allowing non-native species to establish themselves. So what are the impacts of these species? They are the second largest reason for species extinction, reducing biodiversity, competing with native organisms for limited resources, and altering habitats. Global economic cost of invasive alien species exceeded $423 billion annually in the year 2019. Additionally, invasive species are a major cause of crop loss and degraded soil quality, impacting food security. Moreover, they can also serve as vectors for infectious diseases. Seeing the adverse impact of invasive species specialist group was launched at the international level. It is a global network of scientific and policy experts on invasive species established in 1994. It is organized under the Species Survival Commission of the International Union for Conservation of Nature or IUCN. In our next news, Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission and Small Industries Development Bank of India have signed an MOU to help SHGs. Small Industry Development Bank of India is a principal financial institution for the promotion, financing and development of the MSME sector. It is a statutory body under Ministry of Finance and was established in the year 1990 by the government as a wholly owned subsidiary of Industrial Development Bank of India. Before moving on, let's take a closer look at the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana National Rural Livelihood Mission. Falling under the Ministry of Rural Development, it is a flagship poverty alleviation program focused on building strong institutions for the poor, particularly women, and providing access to financial services and livelihoods. It adopts a demand-driven approach, enabling the states to formulate their own state-specific poverty reduction action plans. Coming back to the news, the partnership focuses on multiple aspects to boost women's entrepreneurship, like enhanced capacity and ability of state rural livelihood mission teams to promote the graduation of seasoned SHG members into micro entrepreneurs, establishment of a reliable and sensitive support architecture for women led enterprises, and implementation of standardized protocols within the mission to support women led enterprises. For instance, they act as a bridge between women entrepreneurs who have the will to begin an enterprise but do not have the resources to fulfill their dream and the finances needed for it. A great example of this is Kerala's Kudumshri model. Also, SHGs work as platforms that promote solidarity and bring women together on issues of health, nutrition, gender parity, and gender justice. For example, as in Denlang SHG. SHGs also create an environment, especially among women from rural areas, to develop greater agency and decision making skills.
Moving to the next news. Recently, the Court of the Chief Commissioner has passed two important judgments to promote the accessibility and rights of the differently abled individuals. The court has mandated that any government office in the country operating from buildings that are not accessible to the differently abled or Divyangjan must relocate their services to the ground floor or any accessible location within the same facility. In another case, it has highlighted that the airline's policy necessitating medical clearance categories of PWD is inconsistent with global civil aviation requirements. The court has emphasized that all airlines operating in the country, Indian or foreign, are responsible for implementing Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 or the RPWD Act. Let's briefly discuss the Office of Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities. It was set up under Persons with Disabilities Act 1995 or the PWD Act. The RPWD Act 2016, which replaced the PWD Act 1995, provides for Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities and two commissioners. It has been mandated to take steps to safeguard the rights of the PWD and to identify any program or policy inconsistent with the RPWD Act. The Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment is the nodal ministry. Apart from the two judgments, several other steps have been taken for the differently abled persons by the ministry, which include the National Action Plan or the NAP for skill development to provide skill training to the differently abled for enabling them to become self-reliant. The scheme of assistance to the PWDs for purchases of fitting of aids or appliances. And last but not the least, the Accessible India campaign or the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan, which focuses on developing accessible physical environment, transportation system, and information and communication ecosystem to the PWDs. The place in the news today is Myanmar with its capital Naypyidaw. Recently, the Myanmar junta leader said the country is at the risk of breaking apart due to clashes. Let's briefly discuss the political features of Myanmar. The country is bordered by China in the north and northeast, Laos in the east, Thailand in the southeast, Bangladesh in the west, and India in the northwest. It has maritime boundaries with the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal to the south and southwest. Coming to its geographical features, it has mountain ranges like the Patkai Range, Naga Hills, and Chin Hills. These hills form the border between India and Myanmar. Mount Kakabo, which is 5,881 meters high, is its highest peak. In the south, it has Rakhine Mountains or Arakan Mountains. While Shan Plateau is its major plateau, rivers like Irrawaddy, Salween, Chinwin, and Sitang are the important rivers of Myanmar.
As we conclude today's main news, let's go through some quick updates. The center claimed in the Supreme Court that the Central Bureau of Investigation is an independent agency and the union government has no control in CBI's functioning. Navy Chief highlighted the role of Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness during the 4th Goa Maritime Conclave. Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness is a technology and training initiative to enhance maritime domain awareness in the Indo-Pacific region. It was announced at the 2022 Quad Leader Summit in Tokyo. Indian Agricultural Research Institute has bred Pusa 2090 that yields just as much and matures in only 120 to 125 days. Its maturing period gives ample time to farmers to clear fields before the wheat sowing season in mid-November. The Supreme Court upheld sections of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016 relating to the appointment of resolution professional, adjudicatory process, and interim moratorium. The code was introduced to overhaul the corporate distress resolution regime in India and create a time-bound mechanism for resolution. Recently, e-way bill generation in India crossed 10 crore for the first time since its introduction. E-way bill is an electronic document generated on a portal evidencing the movement of goods and indicating whether tax has been paid. A new island emerged off Japan after an underwater volcano eruption. Scientists said it was formed due to phreatomagmatic eruptions. It is a type of eruption that involves both magma and water, which typically interact explosively, leading to concurrent ejection of steam and pyroclastic fragments. 5 new pulsars were recently discovered with FAST or 500 aperture spherical telescope. Pulsars are rapidly rotating neutron stars. Scientists have detected atomic oxygen in the atmosphere of Venus through Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy or SOFIA Airborne Observatory. SOFIA is a joint program of NASA and German Aerospace Center, and it is the world's largest airborne astronomical observatory. Before we go, it's time to put your knowledge to the test in today's segment of Test Your Learning. For joining us. We hope you enjoyed this edition of News Today. To get the answers to today's quiz and to download the PDF of News Today, make sure to check out the links in the description below. Before we end this edition, we at Vision IS wish you a very happy and prosperous Diwali.